It's funny. We spend so much time talking about boomers, and we're totally obsessed with millennials and Gen Z. But what about that whole generation sandwiched right in the middle? The one we almost never mention. Well, today, we're going to unlock the psychology of that so-called invisible generation.
I mean, really think about it for a second. When was the last time you saw a big headline or a viral video all about Generation X? They're kind of the quiet ones, the ones who just put their heads down and get the work done. But their story, well, it's absolutely crucial to understanding the world we're all living in right now. And yeah, this visual right here, it pretty much says it all, doesn't it? Gen X is often seen as this faded out group stuck between two massive, culturally loud generations. They really are the demographic middle child, and trust me, they've developed a whole psychology to match.
So let's make it official. We're talking about folks born roughly between 1965 and 1980. Their story, their unique experiences, they hold all the clues to their very distinct worldview. To really get them, you have to look at the world that made them.
Okay, so our first big clue starts with a sound. Or actually, the lack of one. It's that profound silence of an empty house after school. For a whole lot of Gen Xers, this wasn't an exception. It was the daily routine. Now check out this number because the scale of this is just staggering. 7 million. By the mid-'80s, 7 million kids were what we call latchkey kids. And this wasn't just about them microwaving their own snacks. No, this was basically a massive, unplanned social experiment in forced independence. They learned really young that you just couldn't assume someone would be there for you. And that experience? It created something really specific in their minds. Psychologists have a term for it, a high contingency environment. All that means is if you did something, the consequence happened right away. There was no buffer. You break a glass, you have to figure out how to clean it up safely. You forget your homework? Too bad. No one's there to help you. It literally wired their brains to think differently.
So all of this childhood independence created what you could call the Latchkey legacy. We're talking a fierce, almost stubborn independence and a very gritty, real-world pragmatism. They learned to think strategically, always trying to be 3 steps ahead to avoid a problem before it started. But, and this is key, it also explains that deep, deep unwillingness to ask for help. Why? Because for them, being completely self-reliant was the only choice they ever had.
All right, on to our next clue. So while they were learning to take care of themselves at home, the world outside was teaching them another pretty tough lesson. Don't trust the system. Any system. Just look at this timeline. It's just a relentless drumbeat of institutions failing them. Their formative years were filled with soaring divorce rates, Watergate, mass corporate layoffs, then later the dot-com bust and the 2008 crash. They were constantly told to work hard, follow the rules, but then they had a front row seat to watch the rules get changed or just completely thrown out again and again.
And this quote just nails the mindset that came out of all that. It's not that they are pessimists, not really. You could call it a kind of defensive realism. They learned to hope for the best, for sure, but they always prepare for the worst, because their actual lived experience showed them that the rug absolutely could and probably would get pulled out from under them at any moment. So how do you possibly cope with that level of constant instability? Well, you build yourself some armor. And for Gen X, that armor was irony. That detached, sometimes sarcastic sense of humor became a shield. It was a way to laugh at something before it could hurt you. A way to keep all the world's constant disappointments at arm's length. Okay, so we've got the radical self-reliance from the empty house, and we've got the armor of skepticism from a world of broken promises. Now let's see how those two clues snap together to build their unique professional profile. It's all about competence over loyalty. This right here, this is the absolute heart of the Gen X work ethic. Think about it. After watching their parents get laid off after 30 years of loyal service, they learned a hard lesson that loyalty to a company was a one-way street. So they placed their loyalty in the one thing no one could ever take from them: their own skills, their own knowledge, their own competence. And this table just makes that contrast so incredibly stark. On the one hand, you have their parents' world, company loyalty, respect for the title on the door, the idea of a job for life. Then you have the Gen X reality, self-reliance, respect for what you can actually do, and the core belief that nothing, especially a job, lasts forever. And this leads to this really fascinating paradox in their behavior.
They are intensely independent. They will almost never ask you for help. But, and this is the twist, if they see a coworker struggling, they're often the very first person to quietly show up and lend a hand. There's no drama, no big announcement, they just do it. It's this quiet, collaborative spirit that was born from necessity, from kids having to rely on other kids when the adults just weren't there. Okay, we've followed the clues, we've put the profile together. Now it's time for the big reveal. What is their true, unique role in history? Well, it turns out they are the last analog generation. That's it. That is their defining purpose. They are the human bridge connecting the pre-digital world to the fully digital one we live in now. Their entire lives have been spent with one foot planted in the analog past and the other stepping into the digital future. And I mean, just think about how unique this position is. They are literally the last people on Earth who remember what boredom felt like, who know what it's like to use a card catalog. And yet, many of them were the very first people to build the digital world we all take for granted. They understand the value of being alone with your thoughts, but they also have to navigate constant hyperconnectivity. They can fix a leaky faucet, and they can write a line of code. No other generation can truly say that. And this brings us right back to the beginning, to the most crucial point. Their quietness, their so-called invisibility, it isn't a bug. It's a feature. It's a core part of their function. Think about it. A bridge doesn't scream for attention. It just does its job, quietly connecting two different places, holding everything together so that everyone else can get where they need to go. So I guess I'll just leave you with this one final thought. This generation, the one that has this bilingual understanding of both the analog and digital worlds, they won't be around, or at least in the workforce, forever. So what happens to all of us, to our society, our culture, our memory, when that last human bridge between those two worlds is gone?